Hello and welcome to another painting tutorial by Promethean Paints. Today we're going to be painting the Thanatar from the Mechanicum and the Horus Heresy. It's a fantastic model by Games Workshop. A lot of character, some really cool weapons. We're going to go for the sort of riser red-orange paint scheme, primarily using the airbrush, and then we're going to be doing a lot of dry brushing, and then finally some battle damage, and then the green effects. So yeah, make a start with the airbrush, primed the model with Vallejo black primer, and then we're just going to apply some Vallejo White Ink directly from the airbrush onto the model, and we're going to be creating some nice gradient effects with the airbrush very quickly, just using some short sprays, remembering not to hold the trigger down too much, so you apply a little pressure through the airbrush. As soon as that paint starts to glisten on the model, move the airbrush, stop airbrushing that area, otherwise too much and the paint will pool and cause some spiraling, some horrible effects. So yeah, just Vallejo White Ink through the airbrush, highlighting the areas you want to be brightest and leaving gradients into the shadow areas, and just follow along with what I'm doing. Okay, with that pretty much completed, we're now going to move on to applying some colour. We're going to use some contrast paint and some ink mixed together. So we're going to be using GW's Magmadroth Flame and some Vallejo Red Ink. So it's 3 drops of the contrast and 1 drop of red ink, and this gives us a nice deep orange colour with just a hint of red to it. If you want it more red, just do a 3:2 ratio, and then which is almost a 2:1. And then if you want it a nice blend with a bit more red, then obviously a 1:1 mix. But I wanted to have a bit more orange into this. So all we're doing now is just spraying the contrast paint over all of the white that we've just done, covering it all up. Again, make sure that you move the airbrush quite quickly here. You don't want any pooling. It's quite thick, the contrast paint with the ink mixed in, but if you spray too much too quick, you will get pooling and you'll ruin the effect and have to start sort of over again. So just practice on an old model if you need to, but this is relatively straightforward what we're doing here through the airbrush. And that's it. Pretty straightforward. What I quickly do after this is just apply some AK Ultra Matte Varnish over the entire model, just to protect the work we've just done. Helps also sort of just flat everything down a little bit, takes away some of the shine, but it's mostly there to protect that paint job. Yeah, so next stage, a bit of a boring one, it's sort of colouring in now. So you just need some matte black paint. I use the Army Painters matte black, but a Baden black, any just normal black colour. And all we're doing now is just blocking in all of the areas that aren't the armour. So all of the metallic areas, the weapons, anything that isn't the orange armour, just now paint in black. You don't have to necessarily do this, but it just unifies everything back up, because in a minute we're going to be doing some dry brushing for all of the silver. So painting this all in black just helps you learn where all the different parts are of the model with the different shapes, and just offers a good base colour for your metallic work a bit later on. This doesn't take too long, but it is a necessary step. And we're now just going to fast forward to the future, as I didn't want to bore you to death watching it. But as you can see, I've just gone over and painted it all through. It took me about 25 minutes to do this. You can just see I've just gone in, painted all the areas black that I wanted to. We're now going to move on to some dry brushing. So I use a medium-sized dry brush. It's the Artify size 5. And I'm using the AK gunmetal, but lead boucher will do. I like the gunmetal colour because it's a slight blue hint to it. I think the GW version would be Ironbreaker, has a slight blue hint to it. And all I'm doing now, very carefully, avoiding those armour sections as best you can use a smaller dry brush, is now dry brushing all of the areas that I want to be silver. And there is a lot of it on this model. All of the sort of backpack, some of the pipes, some of the cables, bits around his head, bits on the weaponry, huge ammo tube thing he's got going to his gun, bits on the gun. So yeah, just use the box art as a guide, and just where you want, just dry brush over the model, following the shapes. Don't go up, down, left and right across all of it. Just choose your angle, up or down or left or right, just to catch those edges. And you can see with just a bit of brushwork here, just painted in the silver, quite roughly actually, around his head, as I didn't want to risk hitting the any of the paintwork. So I'm just using the brush here, almost a sort of a wet dry brush, just to fill in any gaps that I didn't have the sort of same size dry brush for. Now we're going to do some highlighting, and for this I'm using Games Workshop Stormholt Silver. Any bright silver will do here, and I'm just going to run it across the areas that I really want to be the shiniest, so along the top edges. Not too much. I wanted quite a grim darkish silver effect on this model, so just on those very top edges where I want it to be bright, mostly on the back and on the gun. We're going to move on to the gold now. There's not actually that much gold on this model, and I'm going to be doing a base coat of rusty gold. You could use Balthazar gold, is it, for Games Workshop? Just any mid-tone gold. So I'm using rusty gold here, and then I'm going to use AK old gold over the top as the bright point. So yeah, just a mid-tone gold and a shiny gold is all you need here. As I said, there aren't that many. I didn't want too much gold on these. I always think for the robots, silver, black with a hint of gold always works very well. And as I said, I'm going for a slightly grimdark feel to these robots, so nice bright armour but quite dulled, worn metals. now just doing some highlighting with the cables. And with that I use some anthracite grey, so a darkest grey colour, mixing in with some white. I don't do too much of this, it just any large cables you've got, sort of like rubber tube cables, just use a dark grey to highlight, and then mix in a little bit of white to that, just to give us sort of second highlight on the topmost points. There's a few of these around the model. There's one on the head there, big one on the gun. Just highlight these as you see fit across the model. We also have, there's a couple of skulls, one on the top of the gun and one underneath his main breastplate, and for these, for Games Workshop colours, you just a darkish brown like a Steel Legion drab, or a Xandri dust, and then a lightish bone colour, which would be like a Ushabti bone, some colours like that. For the AK colours I have used AK Mud Brown, and then I've used a Light Earth, AK Tan Earth as the highlight colour, mixed with a little bit of white or ivory for the top coat, but any of your sort of standard skull colours will work for this. Very small, you could leave these silver if you wanted to. I just wanted them to look like skulls. Okay, and with that process pretty much done, we're moving on to probably the longest process now, which is edge highlighting and battle damage. So as you can see, I've got AK Light Rust and AK Sunny Skin Tone, and I make a sort of 50-50 mix of this. Because this is an orangey red colour, it's hard to get an exact colour. I'm still going through to see if I can find an exact match to this, but a 50-50 mix of those two colours gives us a nice bright but not too bright edge highlight colour. Light Rust wasn't enough on its own, so I added another brighter tone, just to highlight it a bit more. And with this now, all we're going to be doing is edge highlighting all the edges and applying battle damage in the way we've done it on so many models. It's a sort of standard approach. So if this is your first time seeing it, what we do is you sort of edge highlight as normal. It's a gun getting in the way there of what I'm doing. But you do it with a thicker line, and you add scratches and dents and bullet holes with your lighter colour, thinking that in a minute we're going to be filling those holes in with black to make it look like there's torn paintwork, ripped paintwork, dented paintwork, bullet hole paintwork, damaged paintwork. So if you'll just follow along this, you'll quickly get the idea of what I'm doing. Is thick edge highlight with your bright colour, and then once we've done all of that, we will go in and fill in those gaps with black. So some parts you keep standard with your edge highlighting, other parts where you want to add your damage you add as much or as little as you want. So you don't want to add too much, it can be quite overbearing, but I'm going for quite a heavy approach here. I wanted this army to look quite worn, as if they've been battling for many years on Mars, and have got a lot of damage to show for it. This is quite a long process, especially on such a big model as this. There's a lot of armour, but just take your time. This really helps if you find edge highlighting tough. I do. I've got quite a shaky right hand, so this, as you're doing it, you get any shakes or any mistakes, it's battle damage. There are no mistakes that you make here, just a little bit of damage on the model. And yeah, so just follow along where I'm doing it. And there are a lot of pictures at the end of this, but it's all personal taste here. If you don't want to add a battle damage, just edge highlight as normal with this colour. Okay, and we're just going to skip a little bit forward here. As you can also see, I applied the transfers as well just before we did all this edge highlighting, and then once we come to a sort of end here, we're going to then just start adding the black, and for this we just use our standard matte black. So I'm going to use the Army Painters matte black, but Abaddon black is fine. The Too Thin Coat black is also good. Just any standard matte black, and all we're doing here is just almost re-edge highlighting, but we're just filling in all those areas that we've filled up. I do all this in one go across the whole model. When you're first doing this, it might be worth doing it panel by panel, just so that you don't lose track of where you are. You will miss bits, but then after each, you can just review each section that you've done and fill in any gaps that you found. And there we go. Edge highlighting and battle damage all done. All together, what's that? It's about 20-30 minutes that's taken, but it gives a really good effect. Really helps define the model. And then the next stage we're going to be doing is adding some of the glowing effects. So for this, we'll be starting off with some white. So I use the AK white, but any standard white is fine here. And all I'm going to be doing here is filling in the areas pure white, what I want to be green. So these are the vent holes, the eyes, an area around the gun that I really wanted to shine with the white. Be careful here. You might just want to thin down your white a little bit just so it flows in. Doesn't matter having it a bit too wet. It might take a few coats to thin to get it into all those gaps. So what the white will do is add a really good base for the fluorescent paint that we're going to add. We'll do the airbrush first and then apply the fluorescent paint, so that this white that we're adding is almost showing where the brightest points are going to be with the glowing effects. Okay, now I want to add some sort of desaturated white almost for some areas. And what I've done in this pot of contrast, this old contrast pot, is I've made a mix of 1 part Vallejo White Ink, 3 parts water, and 1 part contrast medium. And what this does is create you a white wash that flows into all the nooks and crannies, almost like a shade paint would do. And all I'm doing here is the white is the central point of brightness, and then the contrast sort of mixed white will be the sort of blend to it. So even as you can see here, I missed a couple of spots. I'm using a Rosemary & Co liner brush for this, because it just helps get into some of those really fine points. I've done a good job here of hiding away some of the dots that I want to be bright around the gun, and just follow along where I use that contrast paint. I use it like a wash, so what it will do is it will pull like a wash, so it will be brightest white in all the gaps, and it will naturally gradient out to a less white at the edges, as you would if it was through Nuln Oil. Right, so the Nuln Oil will pull darker in the deepest recesses, blending itself out, and it's exactly the same with this. You see it naturally flows into all the gaps. It's really handy if you can just to make a bottle of this, the old contrast pot, and then make a big mix of it, then you've always got it to hand. And then we are going to airbrush over the top of this with the white ink, and it will need some time to dry. Okay, give it a little bit of time to dry. I think when I'm doing this I didn't give one area enough time to dry and it sprayed a little bit, but now we're going back to the white ink through the airbrush and pointing the airbrush toward where the brightest points are. A couple of sprays will give you a natural sort of halo around your bright points, so it will be pure white ink in the middle, naturally flowing itself to a gradient on the outside, especially you see on the guns here. It's a really quick couple of squirts and you get really bright middles and a gradient out. So I do this over all the where I've just painted white, across the vents, across his eyes, tops of the gun, wherever you've done this, just add some of this. If we don't add this, when we go to add the fluorescent paint, it doesn't have the same effect. It just looks bright. It doesn't look very bright. It doesn't have a gradient from dark to light. You could do this with dry brushing, pure white, and then dry brush from the out to in, always pulling towards your brightest points, but you don't tend to get the same effect. It does work really well with the airbrush. It can work with dry brushing, but it takes a lot of practice. And then once you're done with this, go and give your airbrush a nice good clean. And we're moving on to the fun part, adding the fluorescent colour. And with this, I'm going to be using the AK fluorescent green, but there's a green stuff. Well, fluorescent green is good as well. Just possibly a brush full of water in there as well, just to help it flow. And then we just cover the entire area we've just done with white with the fluorescent green through the airbrush. Again, being careful here, don't let it pool, or else you will get a lot of drips. If you find that there's a little pigment coming out, you just need to water it down a little bit, not too much, just a couple of brushfuls of water. This separates very easily because of its high pigment. So yeah, just go around covering the white, going a little bit over, not too much. Just cover the white with the fluorescent, and you can already see the camera can hardly deal with it. It's so bright, and we're not quite done. This is the stage through the airbrush. We'll be finishing it off with some other colours once we've done this stage. Okay, once that's all dried, it takes a few minutes to dry. Again with some pure white, slightly watered down. I now want to just paint back in white some of the areas that I wanted to be the brightest, and then just apply the white to, like, the very centre of those, the gun bits there, the very bottoms of the vents, the centre of the eyes, wherever you want to be the brightest point, just paint back in with the white. And then once that's done, again give it a little bit of time to dry. We're going to fill in those little white areas with AK fluorescent yellow, or any fluorescent yellow. I find the AK ones are very good. Give the bottle a good shake and just apply the fluorescent yellow over the white area that you've just painted and over a little bit of the green, so it just naturally blends in. Not too much, but yeah, so just cover that white and a little bit of the green. It's hard to see on the camera because it's already maxed out with brightness, but this will just make that green really shine a lot more than it was. And that's the model complete. That's the final step. You could, if you wished, go and add a little bit more white back in, but I find that's bright enough across the model. The next stages we're going to do are just how I base the model. I think it's the first time. So the basing material you see there are some basing bits from Green Stuff World. They do packs of them where you get lots of resin pieces. I glued a couple of those on, and then from eBay I just bought it's almost like rubble, brick dust, bits of old rubble. It's about £2.50 for an entire bag of this stuff, and it's all so super glue all over the base, and then just apply this and give it an hour or so to dry, and then obviously I primed it with black when I primed the model. And I'm using some AK mud brown, and I'm almost wet dry brushing across the entire base now, taking care where his feet are, going over it a little bit, but just heavily going in here to fill as much of it as I can, but still leaving some black at the bottom, so it's almost like a very, very heavy dry brush, covering it all up. I also bought loads of, I think it was 100 resin skulls from Etsy for £10. I added that into the mix, so I've got a sort of ice cream tub with a mix of all the different rubbly bits from eBay and resiny bits. I even put some old bits from models that we don't, sort of your spare bits. So there's some heads in there, some Necron heads, there's orc heads, there's all sorts of stuff in there, just to help give a little bit of feel. See, I've got one for 40k and Heresy and one for Sigmar, because I don't want, obviously, robot heads in with Sigmar, that'd be weird. So yeah, just going around now, filling all of this area in with the mud brown colour, AK mud brown. Games Workshop probably Mournfang brown would be good for this. Maybe Steel Legion drab. Mournfang brown's good because it's a reddish colour. Steel Legion drab is quite a greyish brown, so just dependent on what you want to use. And then here you see I can just add some water in, and this is where I'm just going to go over the feet and just almost wash that brown colour over the feet to get them to blend in. The next step is I'm going to apply some washes. For this I'm using AK Light Rust, but you can use good old Games Workshop Scrag Brown, any very sort of lightish browny orangey rust colour, and I make a wash with this, a couple of drops of paint, huge amounts of water. I always add a bit too much water because I prefer to do a few coats of the wash. I don't want it to look too over pronounced, so all I do here is just apply the wash, this rusty wash, to the areas I want to look rusty, which is a bit over the feet, a bit over some of the resin parts I added, so yeah, in the deepest areas where the rust would pool, or the dusty rust would show. And whilst that sort of orange rust colour's drying, I'm just going to sort of skipping around stages here. This is almost real time that I'm doing this. Whilst it's drying, I came across these AK play markers. I was sent a black one, and these are almost like paint pens. And I found the black one's really good for painting bases. So as you can see, it gives a very good matte finish. You can buy them in all the colours. I've tried the black, the red, the blue and the green. They are really good. I'm thinking of going to be seeing how to use them painting models normally. The tips are quite thick, so you can do some finer detail, but I found for the black one, for the basing, for this part, is really good. great coverage. I do 2 coats of this. I do one in a minute. It dries very quickly. So what I'm doing here is just going around painting the base. They're always fiddly. Yeah, they're really good. You can buy sets for not that much money. I think each pen individually, I think this was about £5. I've been using it for ages and there's still loads of paint left. And as you can see, you can get some quite thin finish on it. Smiley face. So yeah, recommend it if you want to give them a go. Once all of that stuff's dry, I've done a few washes with that light rust colour. I'm using a big dry brush here, and using AK Tan Earth, which is a fantastic colour. And all I'm doing here is just dry brushing over all of the top areas, just to give some definition to the overall basing. Going a bit over the feet. This gives a nice dusty effect. You could add some rust pigments here, but I don't really need to. I think the rust effect and these colours have really helped. And there we go. That's it. That's how we painted the Thanatar model. Here's a picture of the end. So hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Just like and subscribe for more. If you've got any preferences of what you'd like to see painted, give me a shout, send me a message, and I'll see what I can do. Happy painting.